When it comes to fishing inland rivers that have resident fish, the fishing is a little easier, but the fish still move quite a bit up and down a river system throughout a day and even during the course of the 4 different seasons. So this is where it's very important to locate the fish. Here's an example of a medium-sized river. It's probably about 50 yards wide, and we're fishing a pool, and we've hooked a pretty good-sized walleye. This fish was in the bottom of the pool in about 10 feet of water in the middle of the day. We're using a jig, and we successfully caught it. The only problem with walleye is that they move so much that those fish may not be there in a couple of hours. They're somewhere else in the river. So the challenge when you're fishing in that river is to locate the fish. One of the best ways to locate fish in narrower rivers is to troll literally up the middle of the river. This will cover a variety of bottom structure and different current breaks, and in a very short period of time you'll find out where the fish are holding. Once you do locate fish, try to either hold the boat in that area or anchor up, and then you try to fish right on top of the fish. If you're fishing a wider river or lower stretches of inland rivers where the river is wider, you really can't cover all the water. So this is where you either have to fish out of a small boat or canoe, and it's much better to cast out each side of the boat or canoe and cover as much water as possible. Once you find the fish, anchoring is probably the best option because of the moving water. This way you'll have total boat control, and you'll fish very close to the strike zone that the fish are in. So in the case of a pool, you try to anchor yourself so that you can cast upstream, because you have to compensate for the current taking your bait to where the fish are. Certain fish like walleye can really change the areas that they hold into depending on the light conditions. For example, when it starts to get dark, walleye can move from deep water up into very shallow water. And this is probably one of the easiest times to catch them in rivers, by casting crankbaits to very shallow areas or rapids or pools. Key areas to look for on a river is also major obstructions. These can be in the form of a major dam, or it can also be large waterfalls that fish can't negotiate. Fish will be attracted to these areas because they can't go any further, and usually there are deep holes or pools below waterfalls and also below dams, and there is a lot of variety of food there for the fish. So the fish are usually feeding all day long, day and night, in these types of areas. If you're fishing at the base of a dam or in the pools just below it, one of the best presentations to use is live or dead bait. In the case of the catfish, they feed very heavily in the Red River on goldeye. So we're actually cutting up pieces of goldeye and fishing them near the bottom. It produced big catfish, just like this one. When fishing below a dam or other major obstructions, the pools and shallow water rapids below those areas can also be very productive. Fish that are working their way up to the dams will usually hold in the first deep water below the dam, and also fish that have been lying just below the dam or below the base of waterfalls can drop back into those first pools and runs, and they can very easily be caught by fishing right in the middle of the run or deep water. The other areas to consider if you're fishing smaller streams or smaller rivers is rapids and runs that are used as feeding lanes for resident fish. For example, here we're fishing for grayling, and you can see that these fish are in a very narrow current and they're feeding heavily, probably on insects that are drifting by or invertebrates that are on the bottom. In summary, when you're fishing inland streams, there are several things you have to consider. The first one is you need to locate fish. If the river is narrow enough so that you can cover the different types of bottom structure and current breaks, you'll be better off trolling to try to locate fish. If you're fishing a river that's wider and you can't cover it properly by trolling, then the best thing to do is to drift or to anchor, or even to slip the river with the engine running slowly, a little bit slower than the speed of the current, and cast baits or artificial lures in different directions to cover as much water as possible. Once you locate fish, try to stay on top of the fish. For example, if you catch a fish trolling, instead of continuing to troll, anchor your boat or hold the boat into the current with the motor and try some vertical presentation, either using bait or artificial lures, to stay right on top of the fish. Keep in mind also that the timing in a 24-hour period is very important depending on the fish that you're going after. For example, if you're catching bass or pike in rivers and streams, they'll probably be in the same general areas during the day. But if you're fishing for walleye, they can really vary where they're going to be depending whether it's early morning, midday, or at night. And if there are dams or waterfalls on the rivers and streams that you're fishing, definitely fish below those. Those are areas where you'll get high concentrations of fish because there's usually deeper water there, and also there's abundance of food. And if you're a trout fisherman, especially if you like to fish small streams, either fly fishing or with ultralights and artificial lures, remember to spot feeding lanes. These are areas in a small stream where food will be channeled down rapids or runs, and fish will be holding there to feed on them.